Given this is Bob Jeans, how do I get to sharing my screen so I have all of the participants on it?
CM Jeans. Across the top, you should see a green bar with a black M to it that says options. If you click down on that and say exit full screen mode, then you should get the option to click the participants panel and bring up the participants panel on the right hand side.
Actually, I don't see the bar that you're talking about.
Move your mouse to the top of the screen.
The green one?
Yes, sir. You see the view options?
What option do I choose?
Exit full screen. And then if you click on the participants mode down at the bottom, it will bring up the list of participants.
I don't have the participants. I have a screen that just says Zoom on it. You want me to get out and come in again?
No, sir. I'll have Mark jump over and give you a hand.
Okay. Better? Thanks, Mark.
What a lovely introduction.
Okay, with that, I'll call the Snoqualmie City Council meeting to order and ask the city clerk to please take the roll call.
Councilmember Jeans,
Here.
Councilmember Ross,
Here.
Councilmember Holloway,
He's muted.
Councilmember Holloway, I do see.
I'm here.
Councilmember Mayhew,
I haven't seen Mayhew yet.
okay. Moving on.
Here.
Councilmember, let's say, Councilmember Sundwall,
Here.
Councilmember Shepherd.
Here.
Let me see, we'll try one more time for Councilmember Mayhew.
I'm here.
Thank you. And Mayor Larson.
I am here. I assume everybody's accounted for?
Yes.
All right, with that, council may have a motion and a second to approve the agenda as presented tonight.
So moved. Second.
I'd like to make a change.
I have a motion and a second. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Councilman Shepherd.
I'd like to take the warrants off of the consent agenda.
All right, thank you. Anything else, council?
I would also like to add a discussion around our ERP system.
All right, is there a second from any of the council members to add a discussion item on the ERP system? All right, hearing no second, that request, I guess, dies for lack of a second. We won't be adding that. Any other items for the agenda tonight, folks? All right, hearing none, with just the removal of the warrants as stated, all those in favor say aye, please.
Aye.
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 Those opposed say nay. All right, motion passes. We now move on to public comments for any items that are not on the agenda tonight. I see two members of the public here tonight. So members of the public, there should be, you should see in the bottom of the center of your screen, a raise hand feature. If you click on that, that'll give me an indication that you'd like to speak. And then we'll just recognize you and make sure you can. I'll give it just a couple more seconds for you to find that raise hand feature. All right, seeing no hands go up, then we'll move on to public hearings, presentations, proclamations, and oh, I'm sorry, hang on a second. Yeah, we'll move on to public hearings, presentations, proclamations, and appointments. At this time, I'd like to reappoint Sally Mayo of the Art Commission, position 7, for a term ending January 31st, 2025. Reappoint Rob McDonald, position 3, and reappoint Bobby Harrison, position 7, to the Economic Development Commission for the terms ending December 31st, 2022. And reappoint Shannon Galusha, position 1, Richard Anderson, position 3, and Kelly Coughlin, position 4. Those are all reappointments to the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee for terms ending December 31st, 2021. May I have a motion for confirmation, Council?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to confirm as stated. Is there any discussion? All right, hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Say nay. All right, motion passes unanimously. For any of those folks that might be listening or hearing about it, thank you again for your time and commitment. Much appreciated. All right, with that, we'll move on to the consent agenda. All listed below being acted by one motion. Action items include the minutes for the regular council meeting of January 11th, 2021. And other approvals include Agenda Bill 21004, Third Amendment to the Interlocal Agreement for Information Technology Services between the City of Snoqualmie and the City of Duval, and Agenda Bill 20006, Resolution 1568, declaring surplus property, declaring various items of personal property surplus, and authorizing the sale of said surplus property. Do I have a motion, Council?
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as stated. Is there any discussion? Or is there any member of the public that would like to comment on any of these items prior to council action? And again, invite folks from the public that are attending to put their hand up if they'd like to see me. I know Jeff Hamlin is, someone needs to let Jeff Hamlin. It looks like he's over in the attendees. Councilmember Shepherd, go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to have a little bit of an understanding regarding the interlocal agreement with the City of Duval and what caused the increase as far as how much their cost will be for our services.
All right, Kevin, are you ready to take that?
Sure. So the Amendment 2 to the ILA expired on December 31st, 2020. So this is just a continuation. In the negotiations with the the mayor and the executive team for Duval, we're moving them more toward autonomy. We're going to train up our replacement on the way out the door. So that additional 100 hours gives them daily support for the desktop, which is something they've requested, while it gives our broader team the ability to focus on building documentation, creating standard operating procedures for that person, training that person up so that hopefully in 16 to 24 months, when this ILA ends, that person will be fully trained up and ready to step into a position at the City of Duval running their IT departure for the City of Snoqualmie. And that is something we've worked with the mayor and the city council to build this plan. So this is kind of our exit strategy. Does that help?
Yes.
All right, any other discussion, council, on any of these items? All right, hearing or seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say nay. Motion passes unanimously, and this is council protocol, we will immediately take up the items that have been removed from the agenda. So at this time, I'd ask for a motion to approve the warrants as presented.
Move to approve the claims and warrants as presented.
Second.
Yeah, motion and a second to approve the warrants and claims as presented. Is there any member of the public that would like to speak to this item prior to council action? Seeing no one from the public raised their hand. Councilmember Shepherd, go ahead.
Yes, the reason I took it off the consent agenda and I will not be voting for it is because I have not been able to see the warrants. And that's why I am not voting for approving them.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Mayhew.
Yes, so speaking in favor of this, as the committee chair, I'll report to the council that the committee has followed all the procedures that this council prescribed in the city council rules of procedure for the duration of the COVID emergency, and has reviewed the warrants and has recommended them for, has unanimously recommended them for approval. I would also point out to council members that to vote against this tonight is a vote not to pay our city employees. So regardless of whether we might have some other issue, a vote tonight, a vote no, is a vote to not pay our city employees, to leave them without the ability to buy groceries, to buy gasoline to get to work, to pay their bills, pay their rent, and so forth. So I encourage us to pay our just debts that we have incurred.
Are there any other comments at this time? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the warrants, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay.
No,
All right, motion passes 6-1. With that, we will move on to Parks and Public Works Committee. Under ordinances, 2112, ordinance adding chapter 12.06 to the Snoqualmie Municipal Code relating to snow removal from sidewalks and providing for severability and an effective date. This was revised on today, so there's a revised version in there.
Can someone click on that so I can read it? Thank you. Let's see. That's not the right one. The links are crossed. There we go. Responsibility for snow removal on city sidewalks is not defined in Snoqualmie's municipal code. This ordinance will obligate the duty of sidewalk, snow, and ice removal to the residents and/or property owners immediately adjacent to them. Move to approve ordinance 1234. What is it?
Yeah, sorry about that. Just a moment. Had a bit of distraction. 1244.
1244, adding chapter 12.06 to the Snoqualmie Municipal Code relating to snow removal from sidewalks and providing for severability and an effective date.
All right, need a second, folks?
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second to approve ordinance 1244 as stated by Councilmember Sunwell. Is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this item prior to council action? All right, seeing no one raised their hand, Councilmember Jeans, go ahead.
Would someone comment on what the amendment or change was?
Okay.
So maybe I can jump
Yeah,
in
I'm
here.
sorry, I should have kicked the chair of the committee first. Go ahead.
So there's been a lot of back and forth, which is awesome. Councilmember Ross and Councilmember Mayhew, as late as today, have weighed in on this, and it's complicated. I get it. I see a lot of sides of the issue. I think in the end, what we're trying to accomplish here, and I hope we've done this, is we just want to make sure that residents know it's their obligation wherever possible and whenever possible to clear their sidewalks. And I feel like there's been a lot of language that's been added in here in the last week or two that has softened that up. It has added ADA compliance. So in the end, if you're not physically able to do it, you're off the hook. And I think Councilmember Mayhew had given us some really good statistics on some concerns around that. I don't know if this language has alleviated those concerns. But But again, this is not to try and get $50 out of every resident we possibly can when it snows. That's the last thing we want. There's 2 warnings built in, not just one. It's more public awareness, I think, than it is intended to be punitive. So that's just my thoughts on it.
All right, Councilmember Jeans, then Councilmember May.
Actually, I've had my chance. I want to come back and touch something if they don't answer it. So,
All right, Councilmember.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councilmember, go ahead and leave your hand up then, Bob.
Yeah.
Councilmember Mayhew, go ahead. Councilmember Mayhew.
Oh, thank you. You cut out for just a second. First off, I just want to say I really appreciate the efforts of the committee that worked with this and the committee chair and staff to address some of the concerns. I think you guys have done a fantastic job of trying to incorporate that in, and I certainly am appreciative. I think my sort of and I think that Councilmember Sundwall just summarized what we're trying to accomplish here, what we're trying to address very well. And so I guess my sort of perspective is we're concerned here with snow accumulation on sidewalks. I think particularly what brought this to our attention is what happened in 2019. I think we call this Snowmageddon, I think. But we had snow not cleared from sidewalks for many days. And it created a hazard, especially for those with disabilities. So the solution that we're kind of headed to here, or that's being proposed tonight, is an ordinance, a mandate that residents clear their sidewalks within 48 hours. And so as I kind of think about it, you know, in my experience, Snoqualmie residents, I think, are pretty dang conscientious. Sure, any one of us can do something goofy in the moment, but we usually recover pretty quickly, and we're pretty good at pointing things out to each other. So in my experience, almost all the residents try to clear the snow as quickly as they can. I don't think the problem here is a lack of will or a lack of effort by the residents. I think it's a lack of ability. And so I think enacting an ordinance doesn't really get at the problem. Really all we're doing is making these inabilities into a civil infraction. I think we're focused in the wrong place with this approach. I think we should instead focus on creating some community solutions to assist people in clearing their sidewalks. I'll tell you that because of health reasons, I cannot shovel the amount of snow that accumulates on my sidewalks, because in order to get to my sidewalks, I first have to clear a path down my driveway. And with the amount of snow that came in Snowmageddon, I'm not physically able to do that. So I hired a contractor, and I got a contractor out here to do it as soon as I could. Fantastic guy that lives in the community that earned some money by a fantastic young man. Anyway, I got him out here as quick as I could. It wasn't within 48 hours. You guys remember, you couldn't get anyone out for it. On my street, the city did not clear the street for a lot longer than 48 hours. And when they did, they shoved the snow onto the sidewalk, which I would have then had to try to clear. So I just think there's a lot going on here. And I think our concern is in the right place. But I think we really, instead of trying to pass this kind of an ordinance, we should focus on how can we create the resources in the community to address this and to help people actually do this. What if people are old? They can't do this, or they darn well shouldn't. What if they're out of town? What if they lack the equipment? You know, can we find ways to try and solve those problems before we jump to an ordinance which really doesn't help solve people's problems? So, and then I'll just, Councilmember Sundwall mentioned this. I'll just briefly state, turns out that, give or take, based on data that's that I've been able to discover, and I'll share all of that with you if you have any interest with the sources, but basically there's somewhere around 40,000 snow-related injuries going to the hospital every year from all sources. About 10,000 of those, About 11,000 of those are snow shoveling related. I don't know how many of that 40,000 occur on sidewalks, but 11,000 of those are snow shoveling related. And here's the thing, adults over 55, or those who don't regularly exercise strenuously. So walking around the neighborhood isn't strenuous exercise. Over 55 or don't engage in strenuous exercise regularly are 4 times more likely to have a heart problem related with snow shoveling than people, younger people. There's just enormous risk associated with this. And so with an ordinance, we create a bunch of risk, and I don't think we're really solving the problem. I'd rather see us go a different path, figuring out how we can solve the fact that we as a city were not able to clear the snow in a reasonable time period when that happened. Rather than sort of focusing on penalties and ordinances, let's focus on resources and solutions. I'd encourage us to hold off on passing this, maybe send it back to committee for a little while. Let's see if we can really think about how we can help solve the problem other than just sort of put up an ordinance and not really solve the problem.
You're on mute, Matt.
Sorry about that. Councilor Jeans and Councilor Sunwell and Councilor Hallway.
Those are points that I had not thought of before, Jim, and they're good points. It seems, I kind of like the idea of kicking it back to committee. It seems to me every year we graduate CERT volunteers, and typically they do nothing after they graduate. The city doesn't call upon them, they don't do anything. And so the option of CERT volunteers who are anxious to do something to help the city, as well as churches or scouts, would seem to be sources that are something that if we haven't explored those, perhaps we should explore those. That's what I have.
Councilor Sunwell.
So all great points, man. I just want to point out 3 things that came to mind as others were speaking. There's a lot of talk about Snowmageddon. That is a once in a lifetime event. No one on this call has experienced anything like that. 44 inches of snow fell at my house that year, in that week. That will likely never happen again in our lifetimes. Okay. What is more common, 98% of the time, we get 1 to 3 to 4 inches of snow. Okay. So that's one thing to keep in mind. I believe our folks here are very conscientious. The number of driveways shoveled in our community is very high. The number of sidewalks shoveled is almost 0. And you follow any thread after a snow and you're guaranteed to find a thread about who's responsible for this, who's not responsible for sidewalks. And part of that reason is because we have so many people that have immigrated or migrated, whatever the right word is, from other locations that may have never encountered snow. This isn't about whether people are conscientious or not. I believe our community largely is. This is just about simply educating them on what their responsibility is. Not a lot different than explaining to them, you know, what's recyclable and what's not. There's just an education process that goes into this. But I wouldn't want us to get too hung up on Snowmageddon, because that really is the COVID of our snow events. That does not happen very often. And nobody in the city is going to enforce this ordinance next time we get 44 inches of snow falling. It's just not going to happen. So I think I'm done talking.
Councilor Hallway.
So I guess my concern is process hygiene. The title on this says revised 125. Today is 125. What were the word revisions between committee and council that have been incorporated in this agenda bill?
I would defer to the committee chair or the city attorney.
Mr. Sturbank, you on? Or Anna?
Yes, I can address that. So the 2 changes that were made from the time that this was looked at by the committee was we removed occupant and left owner. for the instructions of the committee. And then we also changed the penalty from $50 to $25. Also, in accordance with the conversation that took place during the committee.
Okay, thank you.
Those are the only changes.
That's
That was per committee direction, so I'm okay. I'm really concerned when we get things changing between committee and council. The other part I want to speak to Mr. Mayhew's partial concerns. The first two offenses are gimmies. I think that's where we can engage in informing and connecting with services for those individuals who have a hard time cleaning their snow. But I don't think that affects the ordinance tonight. And even on the third time, the ordinance is $25, which you can hire your local teenager, although they get expensive, to help the next time. So I'm not sure I see cause for returning this to committee. I'm done.
Councilmember Ross and Councilmember Shepherd.
So I think most of you saw the comment from a resident who has disability issues causing mobility issues. And after snow, she finds it difficult to be able to walk on sidewalks. And also noted that the ADA accessible sidewalk, the cutouts going into the streets were often covered with snow. And, you know, our Snoqualmie Ridge is supposed to be a walkable city. And it makes it very difficult after it snows for people with strollers, people with mobility issues to be able to walk around. And I think this is an important ordinance. It's not too strict. There's, you know, $25 is hardly any fine. And it also takes into account any senior citizens or those that are physically unable to scoop their walks, that, you know, it doesn't apply to them. I'm glad to see that you added in the city provisions where they have to keep in accordance to ADA. I like the additional provisions that you made in item C. I do have a question. Why did you remove occupants and left it owners only?
That was discussion in committee, and that in case of apartments and such, you can't really hold the occupant bound. You can hold the owner bound, but that owner then can hold the occupants bound to this. But in case of rental property, it's kind of hard to, you know, person on the third floor, you didn't do the sidewalk. Anna, you can correct me where I went wrong.
That's right. It's to eliminate the confusion as to who is responsible at the end.
Okay, Councilmember Shepherd.
Yeah, the only thing that I didn't think of until after the committee meeting was, should we give some direction to property owners to not cover storm drains when they do move the snow off the sidewalk? I don't think that we should probably make sure that if there's a place that they should not move snow to, that we should probably identify that.
Yeah, during Snowmageddon, it was rather tricky trying to figure out where the storm drains were. We kept pulling up Google Street View to see where the drains were and make a stab at finding them. But that's a good point. I don't know if anyone wants to respond to that suggestion, or you could make a motion to amend Councilmember Shepherd prior to the vote if you'd like.
I would just say we can't get this too complicated.
Actually, what I'd like to do is just, I think that just informative pieces that would go along with when we have a snow event might be more appropriate than changing this agenda bill.
Yeah, we do similar sort of public information when it comes to, you know, heavy rainfall during the fall when the leaves are covering the drains, the same kind of risk for flooding or overflowing street areas. So we could approach it that way too. That's reasonable. Thank you. Councilor Lissay and Councilor Mayhew.
Well, Mayor, you kind of just touched on what I was going to say is we don't fine residents for not clearing out storm drains. We don't fine residents for not picking up their leaves. We don't fine residents for failing to follow other kind of just simple practices. And I'm kind of the same opinion as Councilmember Mayhew, that having an ordinance and having restrictions and having compliance sends the wrong message. I would like to see this be maybe a chance for us to step back, vote against this as an ordinance, and then look at it as a community outreach process. Look at it as an opportunity to send out a flyer with your monthly, electrical, so sewer and water bill, to say, hey, just a reminder, please keep your sidewalks cleared. And when we have heavy rain, remind folks that we do other things. And I don't think the snow should be any different. I don't see why we need to have extra laws and extra penalties on things that really are things that we can educate. And as for folks coming to the neighborhood, there's an ROA for the Ridge. There's the city of Snoqualmie City Hall and folks there that they can go to get an understanding of what's going on. People on social media are going to ask how to tie their shoes if you give them an opportunity. It won't matter. They're going to ask anyway, because most of the time folks on social media don't want to do the work themselves and find out. They just want somebody to tell them what to do. So let's not go down this path. Let's step back and find a way to make this more of a community outreach opportunity instead of a penalizing opportunity.
Councilor Mayhew and then Councilor Shepherd.
Yeah, so I just completely agree with the way Councilmember Lasay just described this. Let's do this as a community outreach. I don't want to have to vote against this. I'd rather refer it back to committee. Let's just hold it. Maybe we need to do this. I just don't think we're there yet. Let's do the community outreach first, and then if we really see we're a problem, we can come back to this. I would just say, as a practical, specific matter in the wording here, it says, before I just point this out, I think Councilmember Ross really did a great job of focusing us on the notion of, hey, what about not this is the only people we're worried about, but what about our folks with disabilities who can't walk on the sidewalks? Even it's a much greater degree of danger for them than any of the rest of us. But this doesn't really solve that problem. She talked in her concerns, this resident, about being able to get to cutouts, about issues on the parkway. These are not areas that will be cleared by the residents. And if the problem is, well, okay, in this ordinance, we kind of added that the city has to clear things. Folks, we're the city. The 7 of us are the city. If we want to clear things, let's just do that. We don't need to pass a law to punish ourselves. Like, this doesn't make any sense. Allocate the money. Let's get the job done. So I sort of don't understand that. But I think about this. That same person who's disabled is now going to be required to shovel the snow. So on their property, now maybe we're saying, well, but maybe they're not unable. Well, so I look at this provision, and this is where I want to go. It says, we're going to say that people who are senior citizens or physically unable to comply with the provisions don't have to. What is a senior citizen? When I go to IHOP, I get a senior citizen discount. When I go to, I think it's McDonald's, I don't. So if someone knows what a senior citizen is, help me know, because I don't think anyone knows out there, and this ordinance doesn't define that. And then secondly, it says physically unable to comply. Maybe that takes care of the resident that I'm worried about, that Councilmember Ross brought up. But what about me, folks? I'm physically able, but it's very foolish. There are other council members on this council who would be very foolish to try and shovel any significant amount of snow. So I just, physically unable, have we really kind of given the message to folks that we want? So I would really encourage us, don't do this. Let's try and solve the problem with outreach, with community resources, and come back with this approach later if that doesn't work.
Councilor Summerall and Councilor Shepherd.
Yeah, I think education's great. This isn't an and, this is an and, not an or. And until the city declares whose responsibility it is, there's no responsibility. At the end of the day, whether it's 128 hours and no fine, our job is to declare whose responsibility it is and to clear that up. And that's what we're trying to do here. And I think we have to do that. Until then, it's sort of just a nice thing. I'm glad we don't enforce the speed limit by education. And leaves isn't snow. I mean, it's sort of a decent analogy. They both come from nature, right? But leaves clogging up a drain doesn't make somebody slip on a sidewalk.
Councilmember Shepherd?
Yeah, I know that this wasn't my first thought to do this, but I've looked at other cities and it's not unusual for them to have an ordinance like this. And I think that it gets down to a safety aspect. I know that during Snowmageddon, people downtown couldn't get to the post office, and it wasn't clear who was responsible for clearing out the path to get to them. And I think that it is a hardship for a number of people. But it seems like when our staff was super overwhelmed during Snowmageddon, and I think we do need the support of our residents to either try to, and then I don't know if you can even identify someone to hire if they're even able to get to where you are. So I think that whoever is, able, I think that it would be worth saying, yes, you're responsible for this. So I support this ordinance.
Councilor Mayhew?
All right, so maybe as a way of addressing these concerns, maybe there's a compromise here. And what we do is we just take out the enforcement section for now. So we clearly establish who's responsible. We just don't yet go to the point of enforcement. So maybe that's a solution that we can kind of all agree on. And I guess let's find out. I move to strike section 12.06.020 from the proposed ordinance.
Second.
Motion and a second to amend as stated by Councilor Mayhew. Is there any discussion on the amendment? Councilor Holloway, go ahead.
So guys and ladies, I have a summer ritual in which I go out to mow my lawn. And one of my neighbor's dogs, one of the two, comes over and leaves me a present directly in the path of which I'm mowing. Now, there's a leash law in the city. If there's a true nuisance beyond just me, the police have the tool to do the enforcement. They have, and I would expect them in the future to apply their judgment in the enforcement they do. If you take the penalty out, you've relieved them of a tool of addressing any nuisances in regards to this issue. And again, it's just first two infractions are a gimme. It's time for that contact for the community outreach. It's a third one is $25, which is just, it'll cost more to process that fine than the fine is worth. Okay? But it is at least a tool in case there is a nuisance, and it does set precedents that it is the homeowner's responsibility to do so. And guys, I'll measure sidewalk to sidewalk. Mine is probably longer than anyone else's, and I have not complied with this rule for many other reasons. But it needs to be there as a tool for nuisance enforcement, and that we've stated whose responsibility it is.
Right. It's not my dog, by the way. I don't have a dog.
No, it's not your dog.
And I guess you want to prevent someone from actually running a hose in their sidewalk to turn it into a skating rink during a freeze. Councilor Shepherd, go ahead.
The other thing that I'd forgotten is
I want to remind folks, we're strictly talking about the proposed amendment to omit or to delete the section that Councilor Mayhew.
correct.
Okay, go ahead.
Is we really had trouble with mail delivery because the sidewalks aren't cleared. And I think we need to show that this is serious. And this is much more than somebody leaving dog poo or leaves. I think this is a matter of being able to get basic services to each of our homes.
So again, to make sure we're focused on the amendment being proposed, are you're not in favor of striking that language because you?
No, I'm not. You're right.
All right, any other comments? All right, so no further debate. We're going to vote just on the amendment that Councilmember Mayhew proposed. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oh,
Aye.
no, sorry. I take that back.
Let's start over. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say nay.
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 All right, from what I saw, it was about a 5-2 against the amendment, so the amendment fails. So we're back to the original motion with all the original language. Any further discussion and debate? Councilor Lasay.
Yes, I would like to move to refer the agenda bill to committee.
Second.
Okay, motion a second to move the agenda bill back to committee for further discussion. Is there any discussion?
I'm just going to keep my hand up because I want to talk about it.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm referring to committee just because we're going to go back and forth on this, and we're going to have more discussion about it. And then, you know, if you don't want to, that's fine. But I think it still is worth an effort to try to simplify this down to the brass tacks and find a way to look at it as a community outreach item and not necessarily as a penalty ordinance item.
Councilor Mayhew.
Yeah, so 2 points I'd like to make, folks. As Councilmember Holloway pointed out earlier, this was amended today. I think we do a great disservice to our residents and to ourselves when we have things changing in the last minutes. I do my study of these agenda bills over the weekend. Anything that changed today, I didn't see. Now, granted, City Attorney walked us through those, but I haven't had time to think about those and be deliberative, and we should be a deliberative body. So I think, look, the concept, and this is my second point, the concept of an ordinance is that we have 2 reads. The reason is we have the first meeting, we have our some level, hopefully most of our debate, and we have a couple weeks to think about it. We haven't really had that back and forth on this. I would encourage us, let's send it back to committee. Just give us 2 weeks. Let's not rush this through tonight. For those of us that still have reservations, give us 2 weeks just to kind of think on the debate from tonight, and let's bring it back. Committee, you can send it back for action 2 weeks from now. Give us 2 weeks to just have a little more thought on this, ruminate on the discussion we've had tonight, read those last minute changes. It doesn't hurt us. There's no need to rush this through tonight based on the snow forecast. So give it 2 weeks. That's my request.
Councilmember Holloway.
So the changes that did occur were per direction of the committee. Okay, so there was that debate and that discussion, and staff just made changes, took a while. Okay.
Right, but its residents never saw it and the council never saw it. That's all.
And I'll bring up another phrase at this stage is perfection is the enemy of good enough. I think this agenda bill is good enough. It's not very onerous in penalty. It gives us the opportunity to do that outreach. We ought to proceed on. I'm done again.
All right, Councilor Lasay.
I'll repeat what I've said in the past. If good enough is the bar that we're reaching for, God help us.
Being no further discussion on this item, we're going to vote on the amendment proposed by Councilor Lasay to send back to committee. All those in favor of sending back to committee, say aye.
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 Opposed?
No.
No.
It's a 4-3 vote, and I couldn't quite get which was the fourth one. Which way can we?
Mayor, can we do show of hands?
Yeah, let's do that. So all those in favor of sending back to committee, please raise your hand. No, your virtual hand, please. I can't see all the screens. That's what. So I see Councilor
Jim,
Mayhew.
Matt, and Bob.
Yeah, three, Mayor. Councilman,
Mayhew,
Councilmember
Mayhew,
Mayhew,
yeah.
Councilmember Lynsay, Councilmember Jeans.
All those opposed to sending it back to committee, if you could, if you three could please put your hand down. And all those opposed, please raise your hand. Okay, okay, so the
Four.
three is for not sending it back to committee. So, all right, so the motion again fails. We're back to the original motion, original language as amended as of today. Councilmember Sunwall, did you want to say something else right now? Okay. So if there is no further discussion, we'll go to the vote on the ordinance. All those in favor of the ordinance say aye. Well, actually, let's because I think it's going to be a 4-3 vote again. All those in favor of the ordinance, please raise your virtual hand. Okay, please put your hands down. All those opposed to the ordinance, please raise your hand. Okay, so the motion passes on a vote of 4-3. All right, thank you.
Do we need, I don't know what our practice is because we've never done votes by fake hands. It's we probably should have on record who voted for what, in what direction.
Thank you.
Did Jody get that?
I did not get who, I got the count of 4-3, but I don't know who the 4 were or who the 3 were.
So Lynsay, Mayhew, and Jeans voted for the amendment, but against the ordinance.
Thank you very much.
And Sundwall, Shepherd, Holloway, and Ross did the opposite.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Sunwall. All right, with that, we will move on to, hang on a second, gotta get back to where it was.
Hey, Mayor.
Yes, sir.
We don't have these a lot. I thought that was a friendly, vigorous, well thought out discussion that I wish we had more of. And so I appreciate everyone voicing their opinions and on both sides of it. I thought that was what we're here to do.
It's the way any elected body should work. Disagree without being disagreeable or disrespectful or attacking motives and character. So I thought it was great. I appreciate the comment. All right, moving on to Finance Administration Committee. We're still under ordinances. Agenda Bill 21007 or 007. Ordinance relating to City Council and regular City Council meetings, amending Chapter 2.24 of the Snoqualmie Municipal Code and providing for severability and effective date. This is for introduction and action for tonight.
Providing an option for regular City Council meetings to commence at 6 p.m. when such meetings are held remotely online, when no roundtable is otherwise scheduled, would facilitate more efficient consideration and disposition of City Council business. Move to adopt ordinance
1245.
relating to the City Council and regular City Council meetings, amending Chapter 2.24 of the Snoqualmie Municipal Code and providing for severability and effective date.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve ordinance 1245 as was stated by Councilman Mayhew. Is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this item? Or I should just say, Joe, do you want to comment? I think he knows how to raise his hand, so I don't see it going up. So with that, I'll turn it over for further discussion. I didn't see whose hand went up quite first, but I'll start with the committee chair, Councilor Mayhew.
Yes, so council members, this ordinance is also related to the next item on our agenda, which is a resolution. This ordinance does two things. It just does a cleanup, which has sort of been on the shelf for the next time that we did some action related to this section of the city code. And then the cleanup is just to remove some code sections that no longer apply, that had to do with when we were transitioning between the number of council members. But the main purpose, sorry, I got myself a little confused here. The main purpose is to remove from our ordinances the setting of our council meeting time and instead allow for it to be done by resolution. And then the resolution, which we'll talk next about, has to do with enabling language to allow us, when we are meeting virtually, to start at 6 o'clock if there's not a roundtable. And so it would just, it'll leave our physical meetings the same as they always have been at 7 p.m. It just says that, hey, we've been, and we all, I think I telegraphed this to all of you 2 weeks ago that we'd be bringing this forward from F&A. The notion is we've all been meeting at 6 o'clock during most of the last year with the large number of roundtables that we had. And it was the sense of the committee that during virtual meetings, that this was a very useful start time. And certainly from the staff's perspective, this was much more useful, much closer to their workday. And so the idea was, let's make this start at 6 o'clock always when it's virtual. If there's a roundtable, we start with a ground table. And otherwise, then we'll start the city council meeting at 6. It's very predictable. Residents can see this, how this works. They'll know whether there's a roundtable or not by the announcement of our agenda, and they always know when the meeting starts. It's either 6 or 7, depending on a roundtable. So that's the purpose. This particular agenda bill is for the correction to the or the adjustment to the ordinance, just removing from the ordinance the setting of our start time so that instead can be done by resolution. And I should also mention it also allows us to adopt that ordinance tonight in one read because this is all related to the COVID emergency, and we are allowed to do that when that's the driving factor.
Point of question though, don't we need to make a motion and carry the motion forward to do this as part of the emergency? And I support that motion. I just want to make sure we're doing it correctly.
Mayor, perhaps city attorney could address that.
Typically, that language would just be included in the motion, move to waive council rules and adopt ordinance 1245 on first and final reading.
So city attorney, is that something that, if that's the intent here, that I should add to my motion?
Yes, that would be helpful.
Could you repeat the wording that would typically be used?
Sure. The motion should be to waive city council rules of procedure and adopt ordinance 1245 on first and final reading.
Mayor, I move to add to my motion the wording as just stated by city attorney.
Stated by city attorney. Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, motion a second as stated by the city attorney. Vis-a-vis the mayor pro tem. Okay.
So Mayor, point of order. So does that mean we now, is that a small dinosaur we need to vote on, or does that now just a revised motion?
Just because we did them separate, we'll have to vote on that. Yeah, so if we could just, I'm not going to go to discussion on that, although there's some hands up. All those in favor of adding that?
Point of order.
Go ahead, Councilor Lissay.
The chair cannot universally waive discussion on a motion.
You're sustained. If there is no objection, I'll just go directly to the vote. Is there any objection?
I object.
All right, go ahead if you'd like to comment.
I do not believe this is a vital COVID emergency and necessarily needs to be enacted in one reading. This is not something that is urgent. This is not something that is in a life safety situation. This is merely procedure. Therefore, I urge you not to move forward with this until it has gone through a second reading.
All right. Any further? Councilmember Jeans Sunwall. Councilmember Jeans and Sunwall.
Actually, I'm not on this.
Want to talk about, yeah, mine's later.
I'm into the big picture. I thought at the outset I had a question about this ordinance and the matter below as an either or, but Councilmember Mayhew was not explaining it as an either or. And so I need a better explanation or re-explanation as to why this is not either or.
I'm sorry, right now we're discussing the amendment with whether this, whether the majority of the council agrees that this is an appropriate subject matter to both pass upon first and final reading for an ordinance.
Okay.
And we'll stay focused on that for the moment. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of the amendment to basically approve that this can be done, voted on tonight with first introduction and in just with one reading rather than two, as is typically done with an ordinance. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No,
Aye.
No,
I think it was approved 4-3, but let's do a lot of split votes tonight. All those in
do a
favor,
roll call.
please raise your virtual hand. All those in favor of voting on it tonight. Okay, that's what I thought I heard. All right, if you can put your hands down. Sunwell, Holloway, Sunwell, Holloway, and Ross, right? And those opposed to doing it tonight, in other words, want it to come back under the typical procedures, rules and procedures for a second reading. All those opposed, please raise your hand. So opposed is Lesage, Jeans, Mayhew, and Shepherd. So the motion fails. It will be required to come back for a second reading. Jody, did you capture all that?
Yes.
Well, she's got the advantage of going back on the tape and listening to it anyway. All right, so we're back to the regular motion. Again, this is only for introduction tonight. We'll be back in a couple of weeks for a final consideration. So any further discussion, however, at this time for a possible future vote. Councilor Mayhew, Sunwell, Councilor Mayhew and Sunwell.
Yes, so just wanted to answer Councilmember Jean's inquiry a few minutes ago on the main motion here. This is a complementary action to the item below. Currently, as we sit, our council meetings are set by ordinance. Sorry, let me try that again. Currently, the timing of our council meetings is set in the Snoqualmie Municipal Code. What this does is it removes that from the Snoqualmie Municipal Code and instead allows that to be set by
point of information.
resolution. There's the word I was looking for. It allows it to be set by resolution of the council. The item below is such a resolution.
Councilmember Shepherd, was there a point of order?
You have a question?
Is it a point of order or a question?
Point of order. We are not voting on this since we did not approve to do this.
As standard practice on the first reading, the purpose of having two readings is to provide more time for comment and discussion, with the idea that when it goes back to committee, there might be revisions based on that discussion. So we are, as I stated, is there any discussion at this time prior to possible future vote in a couple of weeks when this comes back? Continue, Councilor Mayhew.
Right, sorry. So let me start over, Councilmember Jean, to try and say this clearly. Currently, the time of our council meetings, our regular council meetings, is set in our Snoqualmie Municipal Code. This ordinance removes it from our Snoqualmie Municipal Code and permits that to be instead set by resolution. That's complementary and in fact a necessary precursor to the resolution that will subsequently be proposed, that will then say, will then propose a particular time and sequence, which I mentioned before. So in order for the resolution to work, this ordinance must first pass.
Okay,
Mr. Mayor,
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
yeah, go ahead, Bob.
just a point of clarification. The place and time for regular council meetings currently is designated in both places, the existing council rules of procedure and the ordinance, which means when you change one, you need to change the other. To facilitate future changes, should council wish to make any, with who knows what's going to happen with remote meetings, what the legislature might do in the future, this ordinance says it should be done in one place. It should be done in a resolution. Makes it easier for council in the future. And then, as well as Councilmember Mayhew explained, it does some cleanup. The resolution then proposes the change, and then could be adjusted by the council more readily in the future as well. So, but the resolution should await the passage of this resolution.
All right, Councilmember Sunwell.
Shoot, okay. So I'll just say I can't remember who had raised it. It was in an email thread somewhere that the concern over this is that it's too early for the general public. So just for kicks, I went out to our YouTube website where this meeting is being broadcast on about a 60-second delay. There is one person watching it right now, and that is me. So, and it's recorded and people are going to watch it anytime. So now this may be an inconvenience to council members to make it by 6 o'clock. That's one thing. But I would refute the argument that this is an inconvenience to the general public who might watch it. And by the way, that's not just a one-off thing. There's typically fewer than 10 people watching this thing live.
Councilman Lasay.
Well, I think it's important to note that there's no Monday Night Football game, so Councilmember Sunwell has to only watch YouTube tonight. But that's a whole nother story. I retract that. Sorry, I didn't say that.
No, you're not.
I don't think it's really a matter of. I think the problem that I have with this is that we're addressing an issue that's happening now. I seem to remember in a discussion a few minutes ago, we talked about COVID being a one-time thing. It's a once-in-a-lifetime event. Yet we're going to change our council meeting start times for a one-time event. I went back and looked at council meeting start times and how many times we had either a workshop or a meet and greet. Remember the meet and greets, or a roundtable. And almost 50% of the times we had a council meeting in 2019 and 2020, we had one event starting at 6 o'clock and the council meeting starting at 7. All this is going to do is confuse residents and our guests and our folks arriving for presentations. That if we have a roundtable at 6 and the regular meeting doesn't start till 7, they're not going to know when to be here if we say that the meeting starts at 6. What about applicants for land use revisions or folks coming to speak at a council meeting? They won't know until quite literally days before the meeting what time it's going to start. I just don't think that's appropriate. I think that's just it's a little bit hasty to suggest that we start these meetings at 6 o'clock, but then it may start at 7, but sometimes it'll start at 6, and sometimes that start may be a different time because the one thing that started at 6 may end at 6:25. So do we start at 6:30 or we start at 7? It just gets confusing. And I know the argument's going to be that, well, this is only during times when we have meetings online. Well, if anybody can tell me when the meetings online are going to end, I've got a really good stock tip for you. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments at this time? Okay, again, this is only for discussion tonight, so we'll have a chance to come back or go through committee and come back for second time for discussion prior to possible a vote. All right, so with that, we will move. Councilmember Jeans, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I lower my hand. Trying to lower it.
All right, so with that, we'll move on to the reports. Parks and Public Works Committee report.
No report.
Community Development Committee report.
No report tonight.
Finance Administration Committee, we have Agenda Bill 21008. However, I believe this will need to be, can I just have a motion to send this back to committee for a couple more weeks since it needs to ride with the ordinance?
Move to return this item to committee.
Second.
Okay, motion and a second is stated by Councilmember Mayhew to move Agenda Bill 21008 back to committee or to postpone to the next council meeting. So it corresponds with the ordinance. Any discussion on this?
Sorry, Mayor, which of those two things is the motion? To bring it back to a time certain or to return it to committee?
I'm sorry, I should have not ad-libbed on that. Your motion was to send it back to committee. All right. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, motion carries. Any other report for Finance Administration Committee?
Yeah, I would just say, committee members, we've heard the debate points tonight and comments of Councilmember Lassay, but because this item is going back to committee, if any of you have comments or requested changes with regard to either the related ordinance or this resolution, please do provide them to me. I'll provide them to the rest of the committee, or of course, feel free to direct them to all the members of the committee as well. We're happy to look at any comments you might have, and we will look at any comments you might have at our next committee meeting. No further report, Mayor.
All right, thank you. Public Safety Committee report.
Public safety has been fairly quiet for the last 2 opportunities to have meetings. I think we've not had a meeting in a while, but some exciting thing has happened that relates to public safety for the fire department. The National Fire Academy came to our attention this particular week, where both the mayor and 3 council members attended that ceremony. And I'd like to have Chief Mark Carrera comment on what that is and share the good news.
And I would ask Chief Carrera and Mike Bailey to please both turn their video on as you speak, Mark. Thank you. And thank you, Councilmember Jeans.
Sure, Mayor. Thank you, Councilmember Jeans and other council members and the mayor for giving me a moment to just speak about this great opportunity and occasion on the fire department. Deputy Chief Mike Bailey recently graduated from the Executive Fire Officer Training Program at the National Fire Academy. This is a very, very rigorous program. It's specifically reserved for future leaders and senior chief officers within the fire service. It's highly competitive to get into, and you need to have a bachelor's, at a minimum, a bachelor's degree to actually be accepted into it. Mike completed 4 classes. He had to write 3 graduate level papers to be in. You have to complete the paper before you're actually moved on into the next class. He wrote all 3 papers with an average of a 3.65 grade point average, and his papers ranged from skills retention for our volunteer firefighters to looking at increased risks within the community, and then our EOC operational guidelines. And it's allowed us to really take a critical look at all of those things and bring the information back to the department. In order to, as I mentioned before, for these papers to count and be published within the national research area of the Fire Academy, you need to get at least a 3.0 grade point average, and Mike got a 3.65. So all of his papers were collected there. And these are master's degree level classes. So I know some of the council members attended the very short, unfortunate graduation of the National Fire Academy. We point towards COVID for that. But we're certainly fortunate to have Mike as a member of the department to have completed this training. It's one of those classes that whenever you're looking at future fire chief or fire chief openings, it's one of those key instrumental pieces that they're looking at. Mike did this with ease. It took a lot of time away from his family because you have to go back to the Fire Academy every year for at least 2 weeks. And then also the time writing the research papers when you get back. So congratulations, Mike, on a job well done. We're certainly fortunate to have him in the department and to be a member of the city's team. So thank you, Mike.
All right.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, Mike.
Congratulations.
As I said, you did all the staff in the city proud. I do have to say that graduation ceremonies can sometimes be a little grueling to sit through when there's a few hundred students. That was by far the fastest graduation ceremony I'd ever been to. I didn't get a glimpse of you. You maybe had a camera issue or whatever, but I didn't see you guys queue up. But nevertheless, a great honor for you and for again another gold star for the city too. So congratulations, well done.
No further report, Mayor.
All right, thank you, Bob. Appreciate that. All right. Oh, Councilmember Shepherd, do you have a question? Oh yeah, you had a question about maybe public safety.
Well, I just wanted to know if we can get an update on COVID as far as vaccinations and anything else that's going on as far as what things are open and what we're doing.
Yeah, that's a standard item. We've been ruling item we've been doing in our committee the whole. So I'll go ahead and throw that to Rick or Nicole or Joan or any other staff to comment on that. Rick, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, council members. So I'll have Chief Carrera chime in a little bit about the vaccinations, but we're trying to work on securing a place for vaccinations here in the area with Snoqualmie.
We still are looking at trying to get that done. There's obviously rules and regulations on who gets the vaccines and who doesn't. Obviously, the legislative session, when it first started, there was a kickoff meeting. One of the legislators at the time was talking about how they are trying to work on getting more vaccines available, and kind of the disappointment on them not rolling out as quickly as we needed to. We're still in phase 1 of the governor's new 2-phase plan that he has. That's all based on numbers and exposures. So, Chief, do you want to chime in a little bit about the vaccinations and what you're doing and the meetings that you're having, just real briefly, if you can?
Certainly, yeah. Everything Rick just pointed out was what I was going to say. I'll just expand on a couple of small areas. One being the Snoqualmie Valley Hospital is really the focal point right now for vaccinations. The state and the federal government has recommended the healthcare system, quote unquote, being the primary area where people can get vaccinations, with the secondary being pharmacies and things like that. I had a meeting with the chief medical officer at the hospital earlier last week, and we're setting up another meeting this week because we're trying to plan for a larger scale administration of vaccinations. They're, like Rick said, they're currently in the phase 1, phase 1A and phase 1B. The fire department has, at least the majority of them has had their first vaccination, and they're working on getting their second. And I know the police department is also working on getting theirs as first responders. So as soon as that group is done, also part of phase 1B are different groups, and they can go to the Snoqualmie Valley Hospital website and register for vaccinations there. The whole entire system currently is overwhelmed with people trying to schedule vaccinations. And the reason why is because of the lack of vaccines that are available. It's a problem throughout the country. It's not just something that's specific to the Snoqualmie Valley. And I sat in on a meeting the other day where the group is really trying to focus on when more vaccines start coming into the region, how we can start rolling these out, looking at large scale vaccination sites. You may have heard that Auburn and Federal Way, I believe, are the two that are looking at it from a county perspective, and those are going to expand. But as of right now, the best place to go is to the Snoqualmie Valley Hospital to get information about vaccines, and I will continue to keep you all updated as the process continues to unfold. But again, the biggest challenge right now is getting the vaccine. There's just not very many doses available to be rolled out to the community.
Thanks, Chief. That would be it, council members. Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, and I would just add, I'm aware that I was encouraged to hear that the vaccines have been distributed to residents of a couple of the senior assisted living facilities in the valley too. Obviously the most vulnerable populations. So there has been some progress in that regard. And another couple of very encouraging things is the hockey arena now has been, as you might have heard, they had to thaw the ice out when the new shutdown was put in prior to the holidays. They have now gotten to a point where that ice has been frozen again. They're opening it up on a limited basis to get some more classes and kids in there. So at least they're able to have some, and they're doing that for all 3 of their facilities in the region. And so that was encouraged, at least to stop the bleeding on their part. And then the Northwest Railway Museum was given some more freedom to do the same. And they were sold out on, although it's limited tickets and they're running at a much lower capacity, they were sold out on the tickets they did. I talked to Richard a couple of days ago. And so it's a couple of small glimmers of good news there anyway. So I don't know if Nicole or Joan or anyone else has anything to add before we move on from that.
I have my hand up.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Councilor Shepherd.
I have a question about the vaccines and masks. Once you're vaccinated, are you expected to continue to wear a mask, or how is that going to transition?
Yeah, no, you definitely expect. Well, go ahead, Mark. I'm sorry.
No, you guys were all nodding your head in the same direction I was. Yeah, the expectation is that we're still under the mask rules of the governor's office as long as people are being vaccinated until we get to the level of herd immunity. And then more information will be coming out about that. So until the rules change from the governor's office with vaccinations, we are having discussions in the fire service regarding if all of the fire department is vaccinated, because right now firefighters are having to wear their masks while they're on duty for their 24-hour shifts while they're in the fire station. I'm about relaxing that, but those are, like the mayor just commented on, some glimmers of hope for us. We're actually starting to have those conversations, and hopefully we can start having those conversations community-wide where people can start to relax their mask wearing once more the population is actually vaccinated. But until the governor's orders change, we're still expected, even with the people that are fully inoculated or vaccinated, that they're still going to have to wear a mask until we're at a level of safety within the community.
Yeah, I mean,
how are you going to know? How you know who got vaccinated? Unless they're going to put some mark on your forehead, but which is an idea, I guess.
Little tattoo.
Yeah.
A little VVAT tattoo on your forehead.
They're gonna. Yeah, I was gonna make a joke, but it would be very bad if I did. No, they are actually tracking the vaccinations by cards and things like that. So they're targeting a certain population within King County. 1.26 million people is their target that they're aiming at in the county. So once we exceed that, then and within the region and then within the state, they would actually start to look at relaxing those things while they're monitoring the levels, is my assumption. So if we start to see an uptick again or looking at overwhelming of our ICU beds, then we would have to take a step back and revisit that.
I think if you use the Cougars logo, people might actually start to like that university. I don't know.
Yeah,
that was for Lassay.
A couple reasons why the wet masks are necessary still is, again, until you reach that herd immunity, it still gets enough traction to continue spreading through the population. But the second one, as you've seen this week in the news, is the fear now with the mutations coming out of whether it's Great Britain, South Africa, Brazil. I think the fear is at some point there might be a mutation that that the vaccines would not be effective with. So it's kind of a race of vaccines to get them out quick enough before this thing continues to mutate around the world. Councilman Osei, sorry, thank you for being patient.
No, not a problem. Thank you, Mayor. I just want to point out, and I could make a lot of jokes about this too, but I'm not going to, because I think we all have friends or family, relatives, community members that have tested positive and had to go through COVID. Both my parents tested positive. My mother spent 5.5 days in the hospital. It's a real thing. So the idea, and while it's fun to kind of joke about it and do things, when you have someone that's really near and dear to yourself, that's very sick, all I have to say is wear your mask and follow the rules, because that will get us faster to having all the things that we used to have as benefits in our community. Those will come back way faster than arguing about whether you should wear a mask or saying that I have been vaccinated so I don't have to. Just wear your mask. That's all we need to do. And I'd love for the city to continue to promote that at every opportunity we have, and every time we put out a letter, or we put out a flyer, or we put something out in the community, put it on our website, put it on Facebook, put it everywhere, that we need to wear our masks.
All right, Councilor Jeans and Councilor Summel.
I can speak with some experience about the Snoqualmie Valley Hospital. And if you get an opportunity to have your shot there, I think you ought to exercise that first before you go elsewhere. They're very professional, very polite. It's been a good experience.
Yeah, they're the partner that Mark. Sorry. Yeah, they're the partner that Mark is reaching out to. The fire department's reaching out to Bob to work with, along with maybe some coordination with the tribe as well.
Right.
So, did you get vaccinated, Bob?
I've got number 1 done, and I'm scheduled for number 2.
That's great. Okay. Councilor Summel.
I don't know how particularly relevant this is, but I spent the last 2.5 days in California, and I tell you what, I can say a lot of things about California, and I do usually, but they have, at least in the Bay Area, it's an amazing amount of compliance with masks, like walking by yourself with no one else in sight wearing masks. They have figured out how to get people to adopt that. And I hate wearing them, but it just makes sense right now. So I would encourage people to just suck it up and take one for the team. And yeah, more of what Matt said.
All right, thank you.
Go Cougs, I remember right.
All right, is that we have no other items for, go ahead, Councilmember Ross.
I think this is maybe a question for Chief Carrera. Do we know, like as mayor or council members, where we fall on when we can get our shots? Is there the vaccine? Is there any priority, for instance, for the mayor?
I'm on the bottom of the list because I'm still testing positive for antibodies.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay. Other mayors, other council members?
Yeah.
I'm just curious.
Yeah, they're strictly following the guidance from the CDC and from the county. So it's based on age, medical, underlying medical conditions, and then your primary profession, either as a first responder or a high risk employee or a high risk worker. So is what they're focusing on. So I haven't dug into it because we're still on only 1A and 1B, or at least the hospital's still on 1A and 1B. I haven't dug into further down that list, but I certainly will and get back to you as far as where you land on that.
All right.
Thank
you. Councilmember Jeans, did you have another question or?
I'm sorry. Shouldn't.
All right. Thank you.
Mayor, just really quickly, I will add that it just dawned on me as I was answering that question that there are some opportunities where members can volunteer at COVID vaccination or testing sites, and part of that volunteerism allows you to get your vaccine sooner. So it's a great opportunity to either at the UW or at other facilities to be able to volunteer. They'll actually schedule you 2 days to volunteer, 1 day where you get your first inoculation and the second day where you get your second. So for some, it would be an opportunity to get it sooner than later.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Good point.
Sorry, if I can just follow up on that really fast. Mark, if you can share, if there's information on that, if you can share that, I appreciate that.
I'll go Shepherd, then we'll say.
Okay. My only question is, what is it that we can do in order to get more vaccinations completed? I know that if we don't have the vaccines to us yet, then we can't do anything. But if there's anything else that we can do, is there a list of things that the community can do to pitch in?
I am not aware of anything right now. The bottleneck is the lack of vaccines being available for the public and to roll them out sooner. I sat in a meeting with Patty Hayes from the county and with the deputy chief of staff and the chief of staff for the executive's office for the county last week. And the biggest challenge right now is getting the vaccines. Because if you recall, this is a 2 vaccine or 2 inoculation process. So as those first round of vaccines come in, they have to reserve a certain amount for that second round as well. So until they start ramping up production and more of it becomes available to the region, that's when more of it will be available. So I will certainly keep an eye out for areas where the council can engage if needed. But right now, the biggest challenge is the availability of the vaccine. And I'm hearing that on multiple fronts from multiple different sources.
And I would just say, I mean, that's why Masterton is so important, right? Is because.
Councilor,
sorry. I thought, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry I interrupted, and I shouldn't have done that. My apologies. I just wanted to point out, Mark, if there are opportunities for volunteers to help at Snoqualmie Valley Hospital to potentially receive an earlier inoculation and vaccine, both doses, I'd certainly be willing to volunteer and assist and do that if it helps get the vaccine out to people. So if you have that information and can share that with council, I think that'd be great.
I will certainly. Right now, I'm only aware of it being more in the Seattle region where they're making those opportunities available. But I'll certainly talk to Dr. Wickoff at the hospital about that opportunity as well, because that's one of the challenges as well, is having enough staff to roll these out. It's not so much putting needles in people's arms. They have staff to do that. We have first responders that can do that. It's more of the waiting period and monitoring staff after they get the vaccination. It's a very laborious process. It's very comprehensive, and that's why it's taking so much planning.
All right. Bob Sturbank, did you want to comment or add something?
Sure. Just to chime in on the phasing, to follow on the chief's comments, I think often overlooked component of the phasing for phase 1B, which is one of the phases that we're in right now, is that it covers, in addition to the folks in essential categories and healthcare workers, people over 50 who live in multi-generational households. So that applies to any council members or people that and they may not be aware of that category. So Chief said the availability of the vaccine is still a limiting factor, but there is that other piece of the phasing that's out there.
So Bob, would that be anybody on this call whose kids are living at home?
I don't think I believe it's aimed at parents living at home rather than kids, but I'm not sure. Maybe the chief can speak to that.
Yeah, my understanding is it's multi-generational, as in parents and children, not children living with their parents, but more a person over 50 that has their parents living with them. But I will grab the guidance and I'll email it to all of you tomorrow.
Councilor Mayhew, did you have something to
I was just going to ask a question, but if the chief sends that guidance around, it resolves it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Bob, you still had your hand up? Did you have another comment? Or Councilor Shepherd?
Yeah, when vaccines are generally available, I've noticed on Nextdoor that there's quite a few people asking where they can get the vaccine that they're not able to find it being available for them. Are we posting, where's the best place to look to find out where vaccines are available?
Yeah,
There is a website on that the county has that provides all available locations of where the vaccines are being distributed. I was in a meeting the other day with some school staff that was looking for locations, and what I was told was every single appointment in the entire region was booked. When the governor reduced the age from 70 to 65, it caused an overwhelming of the system. But a lot of the healthcare systems are looking at expanding their reach to the public, and they're looking at expanding that. So I will send that to you as well. We're also going to be, I'm going to be meeting with Joan to talk about publishing some of this information either on our website, also on our as a press release. And one of the things that came out of recently is really like what just was being discussed a few minutes ago is talking about the story about being vaccinated and just really trying to educate the public on the importance of wearing masks, washing hands, but then also being vaccinated to help us get to that herd immunity level sooner than later. So you'll be seeing information coming out about that soon from the city.
Yeah, it seems at the very least we could add a link to our website to direct people to the resources you just mentioned, Mark. The first thing on Nextdoor Facebook that I would say is don't seek information on Nextdoor or Facebook. Then it's just the public talking to the public and rumors and so forth. All right. Councilor Sunwell.
Yeah, if everyone's done talking about COVID, is that it on the agenda?
That is.
Then I would make a motion to I was going to say adjourn.
A motion and a second to adjourn the meeting tonight. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay.
Aye.
Okay. Motion passes. Have a good night, everybody.